The all-new Harry Hill show's now at the later time of 11 o'clock, after the news.
Blair and Bush deliver a 24-hour ultimatum.
Tomorrow is a moment of truth for the world.
Saddam's response, "I'll take war anywhere in the world." And prayers in the desert as British troops prepare for action.
The ITV Weekend News with John Suchet.
Good evening. It's time to decide. Tomorrow is the moment of truth. Those were the momentous words of Tony Blair and George Bush today as they came out of their emergency summit with the Spanish Prime Minister in the Azores. It wasn't a declaration of war, quite, but it did effectively give the United Nations just 24 hours to back a US-British attack on Iraq or watch from the sidelines. From the Azores, Nick Robinson reports.
It wasn't meant to be like this. Tony Blair on the eve of war, leaving home with little support, arriving abroad with few new allies. Months of talking, days of diplomacy have failed to counter the impression that this is his war. George Bush ordered battle plans for Iraq just days after September the 11th, and days from now they look set to be implemented. Despite that, the leaders of Spain, Britain and the US insisted today that they were not yet declaring war. Maybe, but it sounded pretty much like it.
We concluded that tomorrow is a moment of truth for the world. Many nations have voiced a commitment to peace and security, and now they must demonstrate that commitment to peace and security in the only effective way: by supporting the immediate and unconditional disarmament of Saddam Hussein.
The UN was told it had till tomorrow to decide whether to back a final ultimatum to Saddam or to be ignored.
So now we have reached the point of decision, and we make a final appeal for there to be that strong, unified message on behalf of the international community that lays down a clear ultimatum to Saddam, that authorizes force if he continues to defy the will of the whole of the international community set out in 1441. We will do all we can in the short time that remains to make a final round of contacts to see whether there is a way through this impasse. But we are in the final stages, because after 12 years of failing to disarm him, now is the time when we have to decide.
Even now, the Prime Minister promised to do all he could to see if international agreement could still be reached.
We will do, in the next period of time, in respect of the resolution, what we believe to be in the interests of the UN. But I want to say why I think it is so important that even now, at this late stage, we try to get the United Nations to be the root of resolving this. Because the threat is there and everyone accepts it.
Who did they blame for this failure to agree, this failure of diplomacy? Why, France, of course.
France showed their cards. After I said what I said, they said they're going to veto anything that held Saddam to account. So cards have been played, and we'll just have to take an assessment after tomorrow to determine what that card meant.
So there is just one more day for the international community to agree a final ultimatum to Saddam Hussein. One more day for him to flee or to disarm. One more day before a decision that's looked inevitable a long time now. A decision to go to war. Nick Robinson, ITV News, the Azores.
Tony Blair is still on his way back to Britain from the Azores. Nick Robinson is on the plane with him and is on the line now. Nick, a strict timetable and the clock already ticking?
It is ticking, but in fact it may take much quicker than that 24 hours. The Prime Minister has been talking to us on this flight and he talks about the key signal coming overnight. Britain's ambassador to the United Nations, Sir Jeremy Greenstock, is, as we speak, consulting with other UN members. What is he looking for? Something very simple. Is France going to move? Will France finally say that it is ready for some sort of ultimatum to Iraq? If it doesn't do that tonight or overnight, then even tomorrow will be wasted, John, in the Prime Minister's mind. He believes then diplomacy really will be at an end. We may see an emergency cabinet meeting then tomorrow. We may see the first steps to war. It's only if France moves that diplomacy in the Prime Minister's mind has any hours left.
Now, Nick, you're with the Prime Minister. Is this a man with no shred of doubt left in his mind?
There is none left. For those who believe he's tired, for those who believe that he's wearied by this and worried, I have to say he doesn't look it on this flight. When I put it to him, he said, we'll hold firm to the course. Asked about cabinet resignations, he said, we'll have to just see. He knows what he believes is going to happen. He knows what he believes is right. It is now just a matter of time.
Nick, thank you. So, attention now on the United Nations in New York. As we've heard, the 15 members of the Security Council have just hours to decide on their positions. Our correspondent Robert Moore is at the United Nations. Robert, obviously an enormous amount of pressure now on the Security Council members.
That's right, and John, I agree entirely with Nick's analysis. There are not days left in diplomacy, but now just a matter of hours. The UN Security Council will reconvene tomorrow, really under quite supreme pressure. They will face a very simple, brutally simple decision, whether to authorise, legalise or sanction a war that frankly is going to happen anyway. No sign here tonight that France, Russia or the undecided six nations are going to climb on board that war resolution. So I would expect tomorrow afternoon that Security Council resolution to be withdrawn, and that means diplomacy effectively would be at an end. The 12-year campaign to disarm Iraq by peaceful means will be at an end, and the United Nations and the Security Council will be left merely as spectators on the sidelines.
And with diplomacy at an end, Robert, what sort of timetable for attack?
John, what's unfolding here is a very dramatic timeline. The UN Security Council will meet here tomorrow morning. At the same time, in the White House Situation Room, President Bush will be meeting his national security team. I am then told that on Monday night or Tuesday night, President Bush will then address the American people. In that statement, sources are now saying he will make an explicit demand to Saddam Hussein that he flee the country immediately. That statement to the American people will also double up as a warning to weapons inspectors as well as to other international personnel in Iraq to leave the country for their own safety. At that stage, really an invasion of Iraq could happen at any stage, but it will not be a long delay at that stage because no one wants to give Saddam Hussein, certainly the White House does not, any time to better prepare his defences around Baghdad.
Thank you, Robert. Saddam Hussein's response to today's events was characteristically defiant. Iraq, he said, would wage war on America wherever there is sky, earth and water, anywhere in the world. And that was echoed by his foreign minister. He said tens of thousands of martyrs were waiting to fight the Americans. On the streets of Baghdad, though, there were more down-to-earth concerns. From Baghdad, Neil Connery reports.
A president prepares his people. Saddam Hussein meeting with army leaders as he issues an emergency decree putting Iraq on a war footing. The country now split into 4 regions, each with a military commander. The president's son, Qusay, in the suit, is one of them, now in control of Baghdad and Tikrit, the family's hometown. State television broadcast news of the decree, saying it was designed to repulse and destroy any foreign aggression. In the Iraqi capital, the sandbagging goes on. Across Baghdad and beyond, they're preparing, as their president has told them to. Iraq's military are now on their highest state of alert. Government buildings and checkpoints are being manned by the army as this country goes on to a full war footing. At the Al Sham rug store, they were busy removing stock, fearful of the costs of war. The owner, Dia Al-Samareh, told me he's now cleared out most of the shop. In the past 48 hours, the people here have started to calculate what conflict will mean for them. Dia says he's taking precautions because he fears American bombs will fall on this street. This is a country now waiting for war. Iraq's military have been given their orders, as people here now face their third major conflict in less than a generation. Neil Connery, ITV News, Baghdad.
No one was listening more intently to the words of Mr. Blair and Mr. Bush today than the men and women who will be called on to fight if and when war comes. Across the desert sands of northern Kuwait, thousands of troops waited at their bases for the words that would send them into battle. And among the first into Iraq would be rapid deployment paratroopers. They're ready to be dropped into Baghdad. Geraint Vincent's been watching them at work and play.
If British forces do cross the Iraqi border, these men will be among the first. They're paratroopers, elite soldiers who pride themselves on being able to fight any kind of ground war, anywhere. Their Land Rovers, fitted with heavy machine guns and anti-tank weaponry, could form a key part of their advance.
You'll have coalition air going first,